Hello everybody, I am Keaton, and this is Kid Catholic Season 9, Episode 22, and I hope that you all are having a wonderful January so far. And we're almost getting close to the end of January, and it's crazy because we're already almost 1 month into the year. It seems like yesterday it was Christmas. So, anyway, I hope you all have had a good week. And what I wanted to talk about today is something that I think needs addressing. It's something that seems simple and seems like it's universally understood, but especially when it comes to the Catholic Church's teaching on that, it can get really confusing and sort of hard to understand. And that is judgment, because we always hear we shouldn't judge other people, and that is completely true. We should not judge other people, but this also doesn't mean that we should just go along with everybody's belief or everybody's action or everybody's sin. So I sort of want to get into the difference with that. We as Catholics are not called to judge people. It is sinful to judge another person. However, it is not sinful to judge another person's action or another person's sin or another person's belief. Right? We can look at a person and say, hey, that sin that person did is bad, but we cannot say that person is a bad person. And so, where do we cross the line? When does our judgment of an action go too far? And I want to look at the CCC for this. The CCC tells us about 3 different kinds of judgment, all of which are bad. And I just want to read the whole thing really quickly and then get into each individual one. So I have the CCC right here. I'm in the Catechism of the Catholic Church, 2477. We read, "Respect for the reputation of persons forbids every attitude and word likely to cause them unjust injury. He becomes guilty of rash judgment, who, even tacitly, assumes as true, without sufficient foundation, the moral fault of a neighbor. Of detraction, who, without objectively valid reason, discloses another's faults and failings to person who did not know them. Of calumny, who, by remarks contrary to the truth, harms the reputation of others and gives occasion for false judgments concerning them." So that was kind of a lot. Those 3 different types: rash judgment, detraction, and calumny. Now, obviously, it's pretty much universally understood that looking at someone and judging that person and saying, hey, that's a bad person, is a negative thing. God is the only one who can judge, right? That is up to God. God made us in His image and likeness. He can do whatever He wants, right? So He is the only one who is even allowed to judge. We, as people, while we have the physical capacity to judge, that doesn't make it morally acceptable. It does make it morally acceptable to judge their actions, but here we see when judging those actions what we are not to do. So I want to start off with rash judgment. I'm going to reread rash judgment real quickly. "He becomes guilty of rash judgment, who, even tacitly, assumes as true, without sufficient foundation, the moral fault of a neighbor." So if we were going to look at someone and see a moral fault, or if we were to see a sin, if we, even without stating it, that's what tacitly means, is that it doesn't have to be stated, right? Assume that, you know what, even though there isn't really anything to prove it, or even though there really isn't any evidence to suggest that this would be the case, that person is probably sinning, or that person is probably doing blank, right? Even if we don't know that, if there's not sufficient foundation to suggest that, then that is a form of judgment. Are we specifically looking at the person and saying, hey, they're a bad person? No, but that also is going farther than just judging their action. It's different if we know for a fact that they did something wrong, that they had a moral fault, and we're saying, hey, that moral fault is wrong. But to go and assume that moral fault is there without sufficient foundation, that is rash judgment, and something that isn't acceptable and is a wrong assumption of another person. Even if that assumption turns out to be true, and we still don't know, that is a fault of rash judgment. The next one I want to talk about is detraction. So I'm going to reread what detraction is really quickly. "He becomes guilty of detraction, who, without objectively valid reason, discloses another's faults and failings to persons who did not know them." So this one I always thought was pretty interesting and a pretty common one. Notice how it's not just faults, it's faults or failings. So if someone sins, if someone even fails, and it may not necessarily be a sin, us going around and disclosing that information to people, that is a form of judgment. That is detraction. That is something that is not okay. Because even though if we see other people sin, we can say, like I said, that sin is bad, that action is bad. But we don't need to let everybody know about that action, right? That is between us and that person and God. And we can obviously pray for their forgiveness. But something really important that I want to point out here is without objectively valid reason. It says it right there, right? Without objectively valid reason. The reason this is here and the reason that's important is if we hear person A say, you know what, I'm really thinking about doing something bad. And we're sitting there listening to that. It could be anything, right? I'm really thinking about doing something bad. Maybe that something bad affects another person. If we hear that and we tell the person who isn't affected by it that, hey, this may be happening to you, you may want to watch out, then that is an objectively valid reason to disclose that information. Because we just heard it, and it's going to hurt or affect somebody, whether physically or verbally, right? So that would be objectively valid reason. But without that objectively valid reason, there is no reason to go around disclosing other people's sins, right? That is detraction even goes into gossip. And that is something that when judging someone's action goes too far. Because like I said, don't judge the person, judge the action, right? That's just like, don't hate the sinner, hate the sin. Love the sinner, but hate the sin, right? It's the same sort of concept here. But when judging that action, disclosing said action to other people without objectively valid reason is something that is unnecessary and far too common. And then the last form of judgment that I want to talk about, and that the Catechism of the Catholic Church tells us about, is calumny. Now, I'm going to read what calumny is again. He becomes guilty of calumny who, by remarks contrary to the truth, harms the reputation of others and gives occasion for false judgment concerning them. Now, this is kind of like detraction, but it is a little similar. This is something that isn't true. It is contrary to the truth. And I'm sure that know people make up things all the time. I'm sure people have made up things about us. Maybe someone says it and they may not know that it's made up, but they heard it from someone else, and it's still contrary to the truth. Disclosing information to other people, even if it is true, is bad. But that is detraction. Disclosing that sin or that information to other people, especially when it is not true, to hurt a reputation, to make false judgments, that is calumny. And that is just as bad, right? Now, keep in mind, when we read about calumny and what it says in 2477 of the CCC, it doesn't just say, if you tell other people about it. Assuming a sin of another person, even if we don't tell other people, but it is contrary to the truth, is a form of calumny, and that also is very similar to rash judgment. So, when looking at someone's action or when looking at someone's sin and judging it, we have these sort of lines that we need to cross. Well, we can judge the action, maybe talk to the person about it, but we should not just go and tell all these other people about it or make up things about it. And I think that that's obvious and something that is morally, objectively right, even for those who aren't Catholic. Now, the trouble comes in with, well, if we're not allowed to do that, then how do we judge an action? How do we judge a sin? And this especially goes into judging certain beliefs, because we are not to judge people at all. That is wrong. We don't know the person as well as God does, right? We don't have a right to say that's a bad person. We should love everybody equally as ourselves, but we have a right to say, hey, that person has a bad belief. So, it's really good. A little later in 2478 of the CCC, there's this excerpt from St. Ignatius of Loyola's Spiritual Exercise 22, in which it explains perfectly how we sort of confront someone about their belief, but this can also go into confronting someone about their sin or action. So I'm reading directly from St. Ignatius of Loyola, Spiritual Exercise 22. Every good Christian ought to be more ready to give a favorable interpretation to another's statement than to condemn it. But if he cannot do so, let him ask how the other understands it. And if the latter understands it badly, let the former correct him with love. If that does not suffice, let the Christian try all suitable ways to bring the other to a correct interpretation so that he may be saved. A part that I really want to focus on is that last part, so that he may be saved, right? If we see a belief, or if we see an action of someone, or if we see a sin, and we are pointing it out to them, that is not something that we are doing for us to be able to say, haha, I get away with judgment this way, or I get to confront this person. It is to save that person. And there's a clear distinction. If we are doing it with the intention to save that person, to help that person, then that is something that is good. We should not be doing it just to help ourselves or just to make ourselves feel better. And if we hear a belief of another, if we hear an action of another that we don't think is right, lovingly coming to them about it is what is necessary. Does this mean that we have to go up to everybody who we know who does something bad, because we all sin, right? That we should just start giving them a homily? No. But it does mean that if we know someone where we feel that this is necessary, then lovingly approaching them with the truth isn't something that is just a nice thing to do. It is something that is encouraged, as St. Ignatius of Loyola, Spiritual Exercise 22 states, every good Christian ought to be more ready to give a favorable interpretation to another statement, right? Every good Christian ought, right? Well, it is objectively a good thing as a Christian to do. And so there are lines we can't cross. We can't just go and tell everybody about that. We can't just go and make up something about that person. We can't just go and assume things about that person. That is all very, very bad. That is like judgment of a person and not okay. But simply talking to them or questioning their belief or talking to them about an action that they make, not to personally insult them, but to save them, that is something that all of us ought to do, as uncomfortable as it may be and as difficult as it may be. Because, yeah, being Catholic is going to have its difficulties. And that's okay. Because at the end of the day, everything in this life, anything, prayer, going to Mass, the sacraments, everything, including approaching someone about an action or belief or a sin in order to save them, is in order for us to get to heaven. So, now that the topic is done, do y'all know what it's time for now? It's time for
the Saint of the Week.
And today's saint of the week is St. Francis de Sales. Now, St. Francis de Sales is actually a pretty big saint, and I don't know that I've done him before, and if I have, it was a long time ago and wasn't a lot. So St. Francis de Sales was a 16th century saint born in Switzerland, and his story has so many elements to it. I'm not going to be able to get to everything, but some of my favorite things about his story, because his story is truly beautiful. He grew up with a strong prayer life, a strong dedication to God. He knew that he had a vocation to the priesthood, but wanted to keep it a secret. He didn't want his dad finding out. His dad wanted him to enter law and politics. And so St. Francis de Sales, in order to please his father and to please his family, went to law school and graduated from there. But throughout this whole time, he kept a close devotion to Jesus Christ. Eventually decided to become public with his faith, become a priest, even though his disapproving family was not happy about it. But he had the courage. Now, what's really big about him and relates to this topic so much is that he was alive during the time of Protestant Reformation, a big Protestant Reformation, and he lived very close to a lot of Calvinists who decided to leave the Catholic faith and go to that different denomination. And so St. Francis de Sales tried knocking on doors. He tried talking to people to try to get them to convert back to Catholicism, but nobody would. Nobody wanted to talk to him. They didn't want to hear what they had to say, so they would close their doors on him. So he found a way around the doors, and he would take a little pamphlet almost and write the Catholic Church's true teachings and true beliefs and true doctrine and slide it under the door so that the parents could pick it up and read it. And since the parents wouldn't talk to him, he often talked to the children and began to play and interact with the children. And when the parents saw how loving he was with the children, they decided they would finally talk to him. And it was estimated that he converted around 40,000 people from that back to the Catholic Church, which is just absolutely incredible. He continued to write and write and write, was a spiritual director for a long time, and he would write letters to people, spiritual directing them. And because he had so many and he didn't want to rush through them, he decided that he would take days and days and days just writing letters the entire time, answering people, giving them as much spiritual direction as possible, which is incredible. He was later promoted to become a bishop, and as he got older and more ill, he still continued to be an incredible spiritual director, and eventually died after giving a nun his last piece of advice, which was the word humility, which is so cool. He was beatified and canonized in the 17th century, and in the 20th century, very recently, was named the patron saint of Catholic writers, which is really really cool. Now, there are a couple reasons I chose him for today's topic. First off, his feast day is this coming Sunday, which is really cool. But second off, he did just what I've been talking about, right? He lovingly approached people with their wrong belief, and tried to correct them in it, not in a mean or harmful way, but tried to do it as kindly as possible, and ended up converting people as a result. And he didn't do it for himself. He didn't do it to make himself feel better. He did it to save those people, and he ended up saving 40,000 in the process, which is something that we should all strive for. And so his story is absolutely incredible. And anytime we feel like we're struggling with that, anytime we feel like we're struggling with trying to judge people's actions without judging them, we can look at St. Francis de Sales for help, who did an incredible job of that. St. Francis de Sales, pray for us. So, before y'all click off this video, we are to 4,900 subscribers. Thank you guys so much for that. And we are trying to get to 5,000. It would be truly an incredible blessing if we could reach 5,000. So in order to help with that, if you guys could please share this channel, share this video to your social medias, to text, to your friends, to your family. Anything would help this ministry so much, because subscribers, I know it just seems like a number, but it helps get this channel more traffic. It helps more people see this ministry, and it would really help this ministry flourish. And since this is what I want to do with my life, that would be really greatly appreciated. So hitting the subscribe button, which is easy and free, would really, really help. Also, I am doing in-person talks. So I would love to come and give an in-person talk to your school, parish, youth group, whatever it may be. Please reach out to me about that. You can email me directly at kidcatholic1@gmail.com, or you can go to my website, kidcatholic.com, and go to the contact me page, and we can get details worked out from there. Also, please check out my website in general. All my videos are up there. Details about my past speaking engagements are up there. You can read about me. Like I said, you can contact me, so please go check that out. Please like the video. Please comment any saint or topic suggestions you might have for future videos, and then please go check out all three of my social medias, which are Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. So thank you all so much for watching. I hope you all have had a wonderful day and a wonderful week. This was Keaton of Kid Catholic, and I will see you all next week. And hi, Brielle.